The Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and your local cable provider presents Cable Reports. Join us now as Cable Reports brings you up to date on current issues facing the Commonwealth through discussions with your local legislators and other policymakers from across Virginia.
From the General Assembly and the City of Richmond, I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Comcast, connecting Virginians to their government. We're glad to have Delegate Michael Webert with us. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Delegate Ed Scott, good to see you, sir.
Good to be back with you, Woody.
Well, as I said earlier, congratulations. I understand that you will no longer be with us next year. Can you reflect on your tenure here?
Well, Woody, I've been very fortunate to represent the people of the 30th District for 12 sessions of the General Assembly. It's just a great district. Folks have been very supportive, but I'm in a place that I need to focus a little bit more on the business that I'm a partner in, and so it's time for the community to select their next delegate. But I'm going to finish out my term, obviously finish out this session, trying to be an effective voice for folks here in Richmond.
And of course, you're leaving as chairman of the Agricultural Committee. That's going to be a big void to fill.
Well, I've been down here just long enough to know voids have a way of getting filled, and we've got some good folks on the committee. We've got folks like Michael who are engaged in agriculture, who understand the language of farmers, and so I think the committee will be in good shape. But it's certainly been a great privilege, and it's been a focus of my work down here.
Tell us how the district has fared economically over the last few years during the recession.
Certainly, particularly in the housing market, there was an impact, and to the extent that we have folks working in the district who either work for the federal government or federal government contractors, there's been an impact from sequestration and some of the federal budget cuts, but we're seeing a slight improvement, and I think like we're seeing with the state revenues, there is some reason for cautious optimism.
Michael, what about in your district? How have things fared?
It depends on the part of the district that you're in. Fauquier, very similar to Culpeper, has a lot of folks that commute out into Fairfax, into D.C. When you go a little bit further west, I think they were a little bit harder hit in Warren County. While they still do have a lot of commuters, I think the housing market in particular really hit that area. It's bouncing back, but slowly and surely. And you know, the biggest concern in the district has been what it has been for the last 5 years, which is always jobs and the economy. People want solid jobs that pay well, not just part-time work.
Tell us how important agriculture is.
Agriculture is very important in our district. Rappahannock is a very low-populated county. Fauquier is still, their biggest focus is on agriculture and tourism, and those two in particular. Culpeper, I represent the northern third of Culpeper, which is the Brandy Station area, and agriculture is still very much a part of their economy there.
What about your other committee assignments? You have county, cities, and towns.
I have county, cities, and towns, and then I'm also on militia, police, and public safety. Both are very interesting committees. I particularly like militia, police, and public safety because we deal with everything from homeland security to Second Amendment rights to just emergency preparedness, things like that. And then we also deal with, on county, cities, and towns, you get to deal with all the individual charters and things, which is fascinating how towns have organized themselves over the years. But of course, my favorite tends to be agriculture, since it's what I tend to do for a living. So
now, you mentioned Warren County, Front Royal. That's where the inland port is, I believe. Yep. Talk to us about the importance of that.
The inland port is a big asset for Front Royal. I also think it will be an even bigger asset. In particular, we have the widening of the canal, which has always been a topic for the Panama Canal for the last 2 years. And I know Purdue and some other big companies are talking about investing in the port. And then as those commodities and goods come up, they're going to come to the inland port where they'll be shipped on the trucks. And the exact opposite. So the growth for the inland port is going to be huge for Warren County and for the town of Front Royal in general.
And talk to us about the importance of the Port of Virginia to the Commonwealth in your district.
I had a chance to go down summer before last when we had an announcement about a grain sale to China. And one of the things that I said at that time was, yes, you're standing on the dock in Chesapeake, but the grain that was being loaded onto that boat might come from Culpeper, Madison, or Orange. From my past experience in the farm supply business, we sent a lot of grain down to the port. That was a part of the markets for area farmers. So Secretary Haymore, working both in the previous administration and in this administration, has done a great job of focusing on growing the exports of Virginia agricultural products, and we've had a lot of success in recent years doing that.
So that international market is a critical market. I understand that 80% of the market is international now.
And it's happening, Woody, in a wide range of products. You know, it's grain, it's poultry, it's tobacco, it's forestry products, it's wine. It's just a wide-ranging range of products and opportunities that we've found. We've made some pretty targeted investments in having folks working in agricultural trade around the world in various offices, and they've done an outstanding job growing markets.
So where you live and work is very important to the Commonwealth, because we need to diversify the economy and get away from dependence upon the federal government.
Clearly we do, you know, and we see that our agriculture in Virginia is very diverse, everything from apples to wine, and that's one of the things that I think it makes it so strong. But in the broader economy, we're looking for ways to do the same kinds of things, because it's hard to foresee any time in the near future that the federal government is going to grow the way it had been growing. And so if we can find good paying jobs for folks in technology, engineering, math, and healthcare, some of those areas, we certainly have the opportunity then to grow the economy.
What can the Commonwealth do to help grow the agribusiness in the Commonwealth?
I think we've done a number of things already. I think that obviously there's more that we can do. You know, Ed alluded to the importance of production agriculture, but we also need to be able to sell our added products, our added value products, like our wines. Wine is always the best example that we have, and really work with our foreign trade folks, you know, China and some of the other folks that we deal with. And then the other thing is, in regards to Virginia, they say in the real estate industry, you know, location is everything. Location is everything, and for the Commonwealth of Virginia, our location is perfect. We're right in the middle of the eastern seaboard. You know, we're just a few hours from New York. Folks from New York can come tour our areas. We're in a good area that where we can put in light manufacturing, industrial manufacturing, and some of our other, you know, some areas around the Commonwealth, so that we can distribute those products. I think Virginia is in a, you know, real estate. We're prime, and we're also in a prime location on the eastern seaboard.
What about transportation needs in your district in particular?
In my district in particular, we just want our roads paved. We have a number of folks that commute, and you know, I think some of the advantages that have come with some of our past bills might help those folks in their commute. But in my district in particular, our secondary roads have come a little bit short, and I think we just worked on a transportation bill this year that will help some of that funding with some of those secondary roads.
Talk to us a little bit about that transportation funding bill that passed a couple of years ago and is being implemented now.
We did make some pretty targeted investments in some additional transportation construction dollars several years ago, and we're starting to see those projects move forward. There are two in particular in the Culpeper area. We're going to finally finish the four-laning of Route 3 between Culpeper and Fredericksburg. That work will be underway in the very near future. And we've recently been able to award a bid for the construction of a new interchange at Route 29 and Route 66 by Eastern View High School. That's an intersection that ever since that high school's been open, we've been concerned about safety there. We've been fortunate we haven't had issues, but clearly the interchange will be a big safety improvement. And as Michael said, we've continued to build on the work from several years ago to really be sure that we're prioritizing dollars and that we're being efficient and effective with the use of the dollars. And I think, as he alluded to, that will help us look not only at projects like these interchanges, but also at the proper care for some of our secondary roads in the rural areas.
And I understand the criteria reflects things such as mitigation of congestion, economic development, especially in rural areas, public safety, and more importantly now, I understand you have to, the Commonwealth Transportation Board has to take a real close look at return on investment.
Absolutely. They really, I mean, Ed is on the Transportation Committee, so he'd understand a little bit more of that than I do. However, we really do need to look at our return on investment. We need to make sure that the roads that we're working on and putting in, you know, the Commonwealth gets the biggest bang for the buck, i.e. you want those roads to be in the best condition for the longest amount of time so they don't cost taxpayers a lot of money in the future.
So talk to us a little bit more about the criteria that has been established. For example, congestion mitigation, economic development, and return on investment.
Last year we had a piece of legislation that was House Bill 2, and it did. For folks in Northern Virginia, for Hampton roads, clearly they're going to look at congestion reduction and mitigation, but we said, you know, in the rural areas that may or may not be the case, and so we've got criteria in the rural areas that focus on safety and on economic development. And the process has started. Obviously, there's still some education going on, but the process has started, and that's why we thought it was a good idea to continue this year with a discussion that talks about getting some money back into the transportation construction districts. Not every single project will need to go through the House Bill 2 process, but we're going to continue to kind of challenge folks at the local and the regional level to come up with smart decisions on construction projects.
What about public-private partnerships? There are several throughout the Commonwealth. They're the new hot lanes. I think the Elizabeth River crossing was one. I think perhaps the I-40, the 495 hot lanes are part of that, and I understand I-66 may be eventually part of that.
PPTAs have a place. We've had some learning curves working with them, and we've had some ideas that some ideas worked out better than others. But I think if you're talking about major infrastructure projects, the idea of leveraging some private support and funding and then giving them a return back over time on their investment is probably the way that we're going to move forward the really large projects. There won't necessarily be a lot of PPTAs in our districts, but in the heavily populated areas, and you mentioned, you know, with the possibility that something may happen on 66, that may be the way forward.
Now, another issue that both of you have been confronted with this session, you probably primarily, but it's a new technology, and we had to balance the interests of an incumbent, new entrant, and consumers, Uber and Lyft. There's an app one can get on one's cell phone. It may not affect your districts, but it's going to affect the Commonwealth, is it not?
Clearly, and you're right. I'm not sure that we'll see Uber on the streets of Culpeper in the immediate future, but it's just interesting talking to people who have traveled to Washington or even traveled to Richmond and have used it because they were there on business, or so it was time to put in place a regulatory framework. Took a lot of hard work to get things balanced, looking at the existing companies and how we regulate taxi cabs. They're regulated in more ways than probably people realize, but yet here it is. Here's a new technology, a new way of looking at things that provides flexibility for the people that work for those companies as well as for the traveling public, and it appears we've got a good product going forward.
Certainly a way to create new jobs, help new businesses develop, but you've got to balance the incumbent, the new entrant, and consumers.
Well, and I think one of the biggest concerns when it came to Uber and Lyft was a number of folks were concerned about the safety of the consumer, and I feel that the legislation that was worked so hard upon really addressed a lot of those concerns. Insurance concerns were always a big one, and as well as the safety of the consumer. And I think they worked very hard on that, as well as to establish a balance between the existing market as well as the new coming market.
Let's talk about business development, because you and I think it's David Ramadan a few years ago created the Business Development Caucus. Talk to us about that.
David Ramadan and Delegate Chris Head from Roanoke, or Botetourt, and myself, as well as former Delegate Mike Watson, started the Development Caucus. And what we did was we went around and we had our roundtables. I talk about it a lot. And we find small things that small business in particular needs. You know, a lot of folks don't realize it, but you know, the federal government categorizes small business as 250 employees, and most of the small businesses that I know of are very much like mine, where I've got 3 or 4 full-time employees. Ed's got how many? Like 3 or 4 folks, and those are the true small businesses. And some of those folks just, you know, they end up reacting a lot, rather than being proactive in the rules and regulations that are going to affect them. So we started the Business Development Caucus. And one of the things that we did this year, we've got one of my bills, what it does is, for instance, in the roofing industry, you've got your workers' comp and you've got your mod, and some big companies, industrial companies, use your EMR rating as a risk factor. So if you've had a third-party at fault auto accident, even though it's not your fault, your rating is going to go up, because workman's comp is a not at fault system. So what we've done is we've created a secondary mod, or a risk assessment index, that's provided so that those folks can still bid on jobs when the accident isn't their fault, because they were getting hit double. Their premiums were going up, but then they weren't allowed to bid on projects. And now we're hoping that if this bill comes through the Senate, they'll still be allowed to bid on projects. And so those are the kind of things that we tend to work on in the Business Development Caucus.
What about getting rid of burdensome rules and regulations, especially those that affect small businesses?
We do look at those too. Some of those are a little bit harder to remove due to interest, but we'll continue to work on that as well.
Great. I know you still have some legislation dealing with auto cycles.
We have worked now for several years here in Richmond to support the manufacture of auto cycles, which is occurring in Culpeper, and to create a good level playing field for the manufacturer, for the dealers, and for the end customers. Let them understand the rules. Following along, you know, the conversation, government at times must be a regulator, but it needs to be done in such a manner that folks can see the landscape. And we've got a couple updates to the work we've done the last couple of years dealing with auto cycles moving through this year, and really would be encouraging to see Tandem Motors and Culpeper take off and grow jobs right in the local economy.
What's happening with horse racing in the Commonwealth?
Michael and I have both been involved in a conversation that's going on down here this year. Woody, as you may know, we did not have any horse racing in Virginia last year. The incumbent track and the horsemen were not able to reach an agreement on the terms by which they would race. And at the end of the day, the track even surrendered their license to the Racing Commission. Some folks who are working with horse owners, trainers, folks who realize the local economic impact of the horse industry have come up with a way forward where a 501c3 like the Virginia Gold Cup could offer perhaps some expanded flat racing or harness racing in addition to the steeplechase racing that they already do. The nice thing by using the 501c3 model is you'll have a portion of the proceeds going back into the community. And we believe there are perhaps 3 or 4 other places in the Commonwealth where this model might fit. And so the legislation that's going forward certainly would allow the track in New Kent County to start back up, would allow them to race a smaller number of days, which was one of the arguments that they were making. But if something happens and that facility does not reopen, we're going to try to have a place for the men and women who are working in horse breeding and training to have a venue to race.
So it's obviously important in your district as well.
Oh, heavily. I represent more horses than any other legislator. In both of our districts, it's vital. You know, the horse industry is in the billions, and when it comes to the Commonwealth of Virginia, we were #1 at one point. And I think this legislation, in my particular view, what this legislation does, in particular, is it allows the industry to really determine its own fate on its successes or not. And I think the 501c3 method is going to be beneficial not only to our communities but to the horsemen in general and to the surrounding businesses. You've got folks like myself that make hay. You've got a lot of folks that make feed. You've got several feed companies in and around that provide the industry with vital things that it needs to succeed. And so I think that this legislation for the next 15, 20 years is going to be very beneficial to the horse industry, not just racing, but the industry in of itself.
Of course, another thing that's important in the economy is energy, our resources, and how we use them. I understand in Fauquier County, Dominion may be doing something in that regard.
Yeah, we are going to have, provided we get the rezoning, a full solar field. Dominion's putting it in to provide power to, I think it's 1,500 homes, and it'll be the first facility of its kind in the Commonwealth. So we're really excited to see that come to fruition.
And energy resources are a driving factor throughout the Commonwealth. Southwest Virginia has had some really tough issues, especially with new EPA regulations. What can you talk to us about that?
We have been concerned that the federal government seems to be putting their thumb on the scales, if you will, and while some of it are market forces, and natural gas is a more competitive fuel source today than coal, but the federal government impacts and the possibility that we could see our electric generating plants regulated beyond the limits of current technology is of concern, and sometimes it gets pitted as an argument that you're for coal or you're against coal, but the thing to keep in the back of your mind at the end of the day is we're all consumers of electricity. And whether it's at our home and looking at our monthly budget around the kitchen table, or whether it's running a manufacturing plant where energy costs can be a significant part of your expense, we need balanced energy policy. We can look at things like solar. Of course, today the cost per megawatt of generation there is not competitive with some other sources, but I think it's good to look at some of these projects. But we need a balanced energy policy, both at the state level and at the federal level.
You mentioned the magic word, budget. Tell us what's happening with this year's budget. I understand it has gone rather smoothly. A lot of that had to do with last year's special session in the fall.
Woody, I think you're spot on. The fact that we kind of uniquely were in session, the legislative branch and the executive branch made budget decisions when reductions were necessary. We worked together. That's never fun work, but it's essential that we maintain our balanced budget. It's essential we maintain our AAA bond rating. And by making some of the choices that we made last year, our work is a little bit easier this year. And then you couple that with perhaps some growing revenues in terms of sales and income tax, and we're able to talk about things like pay raises for teachers, state employees, and particularly the men and women of the Virginia State Police. And so we've got some differences between the budget that passed the House last week and the budget that passed the Senate, but our conferees are going to work, and hopefully we'll have us wrapped up on time and back in the district by the 1st of March.
Now I understand that K through 12 is going to be held harmless. I also understand that there's some legislation proceeding which would affect the tuition rates favorably in terms of our institutions of higher learning.
If you're referring to, I think it was Delegate Rush's bill, or
yeah, there's
in regards to
the flat fee,
the
yes.
16,000. I mean, that's one of the things that if you look at today's economy, one of our biggest bubbles is our education. These folks are coming out of college with $60, $70, $80, $100,000 in debt, and it's really hard to get your feet under you and get started. And so the Commonwealth has looked at that, the flat fee. We also believe that education is one of those things where if a man really wants to improve his station, it all starts with his education. And by holding K through 12 harmless and really working to keep that going, we're able to, for our citizens, which we are charged with by the Constitution, to provide a good education, to give them a very good start towards their future.
And Ed, I know you're a big supporter of our community colleges. Talk to us about how important they are.
That's another area in the higher ed area this year that we're focusing on. We continue to encourage both as a way to add capacity to the total higher ed system and as a way to hold down the cost of a college degree. We're encouraging folks to get a start at a community college and then transfer to the four-year schools, and we're putting some additional funding into that program this year, so it's another encouraging sign.
And we do still have the 2+2 program that virtually guarantees admission if one attends one of the community colleges and maintains a B average. Entry into one of our institutions of higher learning, as I understand it.
That's been embraced very well by both the community colleges as well as the four-year schools, and is paying great dividends for us, again, both in terms of capacity in the system and as well as in terms of holding down the cost.
And of course, Michael, it's also a help to our returning veterans.
Absolutely.
And talk to us about what we're doing for our returning veterans, education-wise and otherwise.
Well, I think we've done a number of different things. What really comes to mind is, I think, it's the V3 program.
Yes.
When it comes, that's always been my big talking point when it comes to our veterans, because these veterans need jobs and things, and the community colleges also play a very valuable role when it comes to our veterans. I know Lord Fairfax is really working hard to ensure that we can, as veterans come back, they can be either retrained or just further along their education so that they become more eligible for better paying jobs as they come back, and that's absolutely huge because that is a well-disciplined workforce that really can create a very solid foundation for the Commonwealth moving forward.
And you mentioned the V3 program, Virginia Values Veterans. I understand also included in the budget funding for 2 new veteran service centers, one in Hampton Roads and one in Northern Virginia.
Those service centers are going to be a huge uplift for our veteran population here in the Commonwealth. I'm sure Ed can speak a little bit further on those, but I know those were a top priority for the House of Delegates.
Talk to us about that as well.
We, unfortunately, compared to other states, our ability to service our veterans through the Veterans Care Centers, our per capita numbers have not kept up with some other states. The funding is a combination of state and federal funding. We believe that we've got things properly positioned so that the federal government will match our investment, and it's definitely something that it's time in those 2 key areas in the state to have some additional resources available.
One other issue facing you as a result of the unfortunate circumstance that our former governor found himself in is ethics reform. I assume there will be something produced this session. Talk to us about what is likely to happen.
We've got a pretty comprehensive bill moving forward, and Woody, as you know, we took some steps last year, but it's apparent that folks want to trust in their government, but they question some of the practices that have occurred in the past and some of the things that have gone on. So we're trying to shore up their trust in government with a $100 gift cap. We're continuing to improve the transparency and the reporting of the interactions that we have. We also went back this year in the bill and reinstated something that we tried to do last year that limits organizations who are seeking to use the Governor's Opportunity Fund from being able to make contributions. The Governor unfortunately vetoed that last year, but we've brought it back this year. So I think folks have really made a good faith effort to address this issue.
Well, thank you for being here, Delegate Ed Scott. Good luck in the future.
Thank you, Woody.
Michael Webert, good to see you, sir.
Could I say one thing?
Real quick.
In regards to my colleague Ed Scott.
Yes.
In today's political world, you have politicians and you have statesmen, and the Commonwealth of Virginia is going to lose a great statesman.
Good. Thank you for watching Cable Reports. Until next time, I'm Woody Evans.
Mm-hmm.